The first thing the station noticed was how strange the vessel looked. Not dangerous. Not impressive. Just strange. Across the vast orbital city known as Horizon Nexus, thousands of ships moved in carefully organized patterns. Elegant cruisers shimmered beneath the glow of distant stars. Merchant freighters carried polished hulls that reflected light like mirrors. Military vessels stood like floating monuments, their dark armor flawless and intimidating. Then the newcomer arrived. It emerged from the transit corridor without fanfare. The vessel was small compared to most ships in the harbor. Its hull carried visible repairs. Several sections appeared mismatched, as though different pieces had been joined together over many years. It looked old, very old. Conversations immediately began spreading across the station. That's the ship? That's their representative? They crossed interstellar space in that? Within minutes, images of the vessel filled communication networks. Some called it a relic. Others called it a museum piece. One particularly popular nickname spread rapidly through the station, the Patchwork. The name stuck. By the time docking procedures were complete, nearly everyone in Horizon Nexus knew about the strange ship and the unknown civilization that had arrived aboard it. Inside the vessel, Captain Elias Ward stood quietly before the main observation window. He watched dozens of messages scroll across a monitor. Most were jokes. Some were insults. A few questioned whether the vessel was even safe to dock near other ships. Elias read every message without reacting. Behind him, Chief Engineer Marisol frowned. "They're tearing us apart out there." Elias nodded. "They are. You don't care? I expected it." Mara folded her arms. The patchwork had been her life's work. She had spent nearly 20 years helping maintain and improve the ship. Seeing strangers mock it irritated her more than she wanted to admit. "They think we're primitive," she said. "They think many things. Shouldn't we correct them?" Elias smiled faintly. "No." "Why not?" He turned away from the screen. "Because people who believe they already understand something rarely pay attention to it." Mara stared at him. "You enjoy being mysterious." "No." "Then what is it?" The captain glanced once more at the scrolling messages. "It's patience." The docking clamps locked into place with a gentle vibration. A moment later, the ship's communication system chimed. An incoming transmission? The face that appeared belonged to a tall alien with pale silver skin and bright amber eyes. His expression was professional. "Barely. Unidentified vessel," he began. "Welcome to Horizon Nexus. I am Coordinator Velis of the Stellar Union." "Thank you," Elias replied. The coordinator consulted a display. "Your people have been granted temporary observation privileges." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Observation privileges?" That sounded suspiciously unimpressive. Coordinator Velis continued. "You may attend public proceedings. You may not participate in policy decisions. You may not vote on union matters." Elias nodded politely. "We understand." The coordinator seemed almost surprised by the lack of resistance. Most new arrivals argued. Most demanded recognition. These humans simply accepted the arrangement. "Very well," Velis said. The transmission ended. Silence settled over the bridge. Finally Mara spoke. "Temporary observers?" "Yes." "They don't think much of us." "No." "And you're okay with that?" Elias smiled. "For now." The Stellar Union Assembly occupied the center of Horizon Nexus. The chamber was enormous. Hundreds of floating platforms surrounded a circular stage where representatives gathered to discuss matters affecting thousands of star systems. The following day, humanity attended its first session. Ambassador Nathan Hale represented their world. He was an older man with calm eyes and a habit of listening more than speaking. As he entered the chamber, conversations briefly paused. Curious eyes followed him. Some interested, others dismissive, most simply uncertain. Nathan took his assigned seat and waited. The meeting proceeded normally at first. Trade agreements, navigation disputes, resource allocations, routine matters. Then a representative named General Korvac requested recognition. The room immediately became quieter. Korvac commanded one of the Union's largest defense fleets. His opinions carried significant influence. The towering alien rose from his platform. His armored uniform reflected the chamber lights. "I wish to discuss our newest visitors." A holographic image appeared above the assembly. The patchwork slowly rotated in midair. Laughter spread through several platforms. Nathan remained silent. Korvac gestured toward the image. "This vessel represents humanity." More laughter. "We evaluate civilizations partly through their achievements, through their engineering, through their innovation." He paused. "If this ship is an example of those achievements, I question whether humanity is prepared for membership in this union." A murmur swept through the chamber. Several delegates nodded. Others appeared uncomfortable. Korvac continued, "I propose that their observer status be reviewed." Nathan finally stood. The room quieted. Everyone expected an argument, a defense, perhaps even outrage. Instead, the human ambassador simply smiled. "If the Union wishes to evaluate us," he said calmly, "it should do so fairly." Korvac folded his arms. "And what would be fair?" Nathan looked around the chamber. "Time. Nothing more. Just one word. Time." Then he sat down again. The simplicity of the response left many delegates uncertain how to react. Even Korvac seemed disappointed. He had expected resistance, not patience. At the center platform, Union Chancellor Seraphine observed the exchange carefully. Unlike many others, she had not laughed at the patchwork. She had learned long ago that appearances often concealed important truths. "Humanity's observer status remains unchanged," she announced. "The matter is closed. For now." 3 days passed. The jokes continued. The photographs continued. The assumptions continued. Then everything changed. The emergency began in a distant sector near a neutron star known as Vesper 9. A scientific expedition had been conducting research when an unexpected gravitational event erupted. The star became unstable. Space itself twisted around it. Communication signals arrived fragmented and distorted. Then they stopped entirely. 8 research vessels vanished. More than 300 scientists were trapped. The Union reacted immediately. Rescue fleets launched within minutes. The operation was broadcast across Horizon Nexus. Every citizen watched. Every delegate watched. Every crew watched. The first rescue ships approached the danger zone. Then disaster struck. Powerful gravitational distortions overwhelmed their systems. Navigation controls failed. Hull stress alarms activated. One vessel narrowly escaped destruction. The others retreated. Hours passed. New plans were developed. New calculations were attempted. Nothing worked. The trapped scientists remained beyond reach, and their situation grew worse with every passing minute. Inside the Union Assembly, concern turned into desperation. Reports arrived continuously. Life support systems were failing. Several research vessels had already suffered severe damage. The window for rescue was shrinking rapidly. Then a notification appeared on Chancellor Seraphine's console. A simple message. No dramatic language. No grand promises. Just a request. The patchwork requests permission to assist. The chamber erupted with reactions. Some laughed. Others stared in disbelief. General Korvac shook his head. "This is absurd." But Chancellor Seraphine did not dismiss the message. She studied it carefully. Then she looked toward the human delegation. Nathan Hale sat quietly, waiting. Not demanding. Not boasting. Simply waiting. The Chancellor considered the situation. Union rescue fleets had failed. 300 lives remained in danger. Pride would save no one. Finally, she spoke. Permission granted. Throughout the assembly chamber, confusion spread immediately. The patchwork was being allowed to attempt the rescue. Many believed the strange ship would be destroyed. Others expected it to retreat the moment conditions became dangerous. Few believed it could succeed. Inside the human vessel, Captain Elias Ward received the decision. He looked toward Marisol. "Ready?" The engineer grinned. "Always." The captain nodded. "Then let's go show them why appearances can be misleading." Outside Horizon Nexus, the patchwork disengaged from its docking clamps. Slowly, the battered vessel turned toward open space, toward danger, toward the impossible rescue that had already defeated the Union's finest ships. Thousands watched its departure. Most expected failure. None realized they were about to witness something that would change the future of the galaxy. The journey to Vesper, 9 took less than an hour. Yet throughout the Stellar Union, it felt much longer. Millions watched the live transmission. On station monitors, in ship lounges, inside command centers, across entire worlds. The patchwork moved steadily through the darkness, its weathered hull illuminated by distant starlight. Compared to the sleek Union rescue vessels gathered near the disaster zone, it looked almost insignificant. Almost. Captain Elias Ward sat calmly in the command chair. The bridge was quiet. No one rushed. No one panicked. Every member of the crew knew their role. Ahead of them, Vesper, 9, dominated the view screen. The neutron star glowed like a brilliant blue-white jewel surrounded by chaos. Massive gravitational currents twisted space around it. Light bent unnaturally. Stars appeared, stretched and distorted. Even from a distance, the phenomenon looked wrong, dangerously wrong. Mara studied the sensor readings. They weren't exaggerating. No, the field is stronger than expected. Elias nodded. Can she handle it? Mara looked almost offended. Captain, she was built for worse. A few crew members smiled. The patchwork continued forward. Near the edge of the distortion zone, a cluster of Union rescue ships waited helplessly. Their commanders watched the approaching human vessel with disbelief. One captain opened a communication channel. "Human vessel, this area is unstable. We strongly advise turning back." Elias answered politely. "Thank you for the warning." The captain blinked. "You're still proceeding?" "Yes." "Your ship won't survive." Mara muttered something under her breath. Elias ignored it. "We'll take our chances." The channel closed. Several Union officers exchanged concerned looks. Some felt pity. Others expected to witness a tragic mistake. The patchwork continued forward. The moment it crossed into the distortion zone, alarms erupted across every Union sensor platform. Not aboard the human ship. Aboard everyone else's. Scientists stared at incoming data, then stared again, then checked their instruments for errors. The readings made no sense. Every known vessel entering the field experienced violent stress. Hull integrity dropped immediately. Structural damage followed. Systems began failing. The patchwork showed none of those effects. Instead of resisting the gravitational waves, the ship seemed to move with them. The vessel adjusted constantly. Tiny shifts, small movements, subtle changes across its outer surface. It behaved less like a machine and more like something alive. A Union scientist nearly dropped her tablet. "What am I looking at?" Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Deeper the ship traveled, the distortions intensified. Around them, reality appeared fractured. Space twisted into impossible shapes. Brilliant streams of light curved through the darkness. Entire sections of the star field seemed folded upon themselves, yet the patchwork advanced steadily. Mara smiled while studying the displays. "She's dancing," Elias chuckled. "That's one word for it." The engineer gently adjusted several controls. The ship responded immediately. A slight turn, a subtle drift, another correction. Each movement placed them perfectly between waves of destructive force. Years of experience guided every decision. The vessel flowed through danger like a fish moving through water, not fighting the current, understanding it, using it, respecting it, Beyond the next distortion layer, emergency beacons finally appeared. Mara pointed. There, the bridge crew focused on the display. Scattered among debris and damaged vessels floated dozens of escape modules. The missing scientists. They had survived, barely. Life support systems were approaching failure. Some pods had less than 30 minutes remaining. "We're out of time," said Mara. Elias nodded. "Let's bring them home." Cargo bay doors opened. Recovery drones launched. The operation began. One pod after another was carefully retrieved. The process continued for nearly an hour. The crew worked without pause. Inside the rescue bay, medical teams prepared emergency treatment stations. Scientists emerged exhausted, hungry, injured, but alive. One elderly researcher stared through a viewing port at the ship carrying them. "This rescued us?" A medical officer smiled. "Apparently." The scientist frowned. "It doesn't look capable." The officer laughed softly. "That's what everyone says." As the final escape pod entered the cargo bay, applause erupted across the bridge. 312 survivors. Every single one accounted for. Not one lost? Mara leaned back in her chair. "We got them." "We did?" The engineer smiled. "Think the Union is still laughing?" Elias glanced toward the distant rescue fleet. No, he suspected nobody was laughing anymore. The return journey proved even more shocking. Union vessels watched as the patchwork emerged from the distortion zone completely intact. No visible damage, no structural failures, no emergency repairs, nothing. It looked exactly the same as when it entered, weathered, scarred, unimpressive, and somehow untouched by forces that had nearly destroyed the Union's finest ships. Across Horizon Nexus, stunned silence replaced mockery. The ship many had dismissed as outdated had accomplished the impossible. 312 lives had been saved. The evidence was impossible to ignore. The assembly convened immediately. Every representative attended. Every platform was occupied. The atmosphere felt completely different. When Ambassador Nathan Hale entered, no one laughed. No one whispered. No one smirked. Instead, hundreds of curious eyes followed him. Chancellor Seraphine addressed the chamber. "Humanity has performed a rescue operation that our own fleets could not accomplish." Her voice carried across the hall. "We deserve an explanation." The room remained silent. Nathan stepped forward. He looked around the vast chamber, then smiled gently. "The explanation is simpler than you might expect." General Korvac folded his arms. "We're listening." Nathan nodded. "Your ships were built to resist force." Several engineers exchanged glances. That was true. Human ships are built to adapt to force. More silence. The ambassador continued. "When you encounter a river, you attempt to build a wall against it." He paused. "We learned long ago that it is often wiser to learn how the river flows." The chamber remained quiet. Some understood immediately. Others did not. But everyone sensed there was far more beneath the surface. Far more than humanity had revealed. Later that evening, Horizon Nexus buzzed with rumors. Scientists argued. Engineers debated. Military leaders reviewed sensor recordings repeatedly. The data remained baffling. The patchwork should not have worked. According to everything they knew, it should have been impossible. Yet impossible things had happened. And impossible things had witnesses. General Korvac sat alone in his private office. The rescue footage played again before him. The battered human ship entering the storm. The rescue. The return. Again, and again, and again. Something about it bothered him. Not because he doubted what he had seen, because he believed it. And that possibility was far more troubling. If humanity truly possessed technology beyond the Union's understanding, then the balance of power had changed. Perhaps dramatically. Korvac leaned forward. His expression darkened. Some mysteries, he believed, could not simply be ignored. And for the first time he began considering actions that would place him on a dangerous path. A path that might bring him into direct conflict with the newcomers. A path that could threaten the future of the entire Union. Far across the station, Captain Elias Ward stood at an observation window aboard the Patchwork. He looked out at the countless ships surrounding Horizon Nexus. Mara approached quietly. "You think they'll leave us alone now?" The captain was silent for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No. You think there'll be trouble? Eventually." Mara sighed. "Because people don't like discovering they're not as advanced as they thought." "Exactly." She folded her arms. "What do we do when it comes?" Elias watched the stars. Then a faint smile crossed his face. "The same thing we've always done." "And what's that?" The captain looked out toward the endless darkness beyond the station. "We show them who we really are." Outside, thousands of lights sparkled against the void. Inside, the future of the galaxy was quietly beginning to shift. And most of the Union still had no idea how extraordinary the Patchwork truly was. Part 3 will reveal the deeper secrets of the Patchwork, the Union scientists' investigation, and General Korvac's decision to seize the ship by force. By the time morning cycle began on Horizon Nexus, the mood inside the Stellar Union had changed completely. Not fear, not celebration, something more complicated. Uncertainty. The kind that spreads quietly through institutions that have never had to question themselves before. Across docking bays, research crews gathered around recordings of the Vesper 9 rescue. Engineers replayed sensor data frame by frame, scientists argued in corridors, military officers spoke in lowered tones. And always the same question returned. What is that ship? The Patchwork remained docked in its assigned berth, silent and unassuming. It looked no different than it had on arrival. Scratched hull, uneven plating, old, worn silhouette. Nothing about it suggested what it had done. That, more than anything, unsettled people. Inside the Union Science Directorate, Director Lysa Venn stood before a holographic reconstruction of the rescue. She had replayed it 12 times, then 20, then she stopped counting. On each replay, the result was identical. The human vessel entered a gravitational catastrophe that should have torn it apart instantly. Instead, it passed through, not resisting, not breaking, adjusting. The simulation paused at the moment the hull began to respond. A junior analyst spoke carefully. "Director, our models can't replicate that behavior." Liza didn't look away from the hologram. "Try again?" "We have. 37 iterations. Every known material fails. Then expand the model." The analyst hesitated. "To what?" Lysa finally turned. Her expression was tight. "That is exactly the problem." At the same time, in a secured observation bay overlooking the docking ring, General Korvac watched the Patchwork through a transparent field window. Beside him stood 2 armored officers and a science liaison. The liaison spoke first. "We've completed passive scans. No violations detected." But nothing matches. Korvac didn't respond immediately. He watched the ship, quiet, patient, unremarkable. Then he said, "Try active interrogation." The liaison frowned. That would require authorization from the Chancellor. Korvac's gaze didn't move. "Request it." A pause. "And if she refuses?" Korvac's voice was flat. "Then we proceed under security mandate." One of the officers shifted slightly. That could be considered an act of aggression. Korvac finally looked at him. "Against what? A ship we don't understand?" Silence followed. The implication hung in the air. Understanding had always been the foundation of Union control. And now, something existed outside it. On the Patchwork, Captain Elias Ward stood in engineering. Marisol was already there, arms crossed, staring at a constantly updating diagnostic feed. "They're scanning us again," she said. "Yes, with stronger fields." "Yes." She looked at him. "You planning to stop them?" Elias shook his head. "No. Why not?" He glanced at the humming core beneath the deck plating. "Because curiosity is not the same as hostility." Mara raised an eyebrow. That sounded rehearsed. "It's not. A faint pause, then she exhaled. I don't trust Korvac. Neither do I. That's comforting. Elias gave a slight smile. It shouldn't be. 2 hours later, the first anomaly appeared. Union sensors began receiving inconsistent reflections from the Patchwork's hull. At first it looked like interference, then like error noise, then like structured response. A researcher leaned closer to her console. Is it reacting? Another answered slowly. That's impossible. It's metal. Then why does it look like it's adjusting? No one had an answer, because there wasn't one in their framework. Deep inside the Patchwork structure, something quiet was happening. Not visible, not audible, but present. The ship was responding to observation, not defensively, not aggressively, automatically, like a system designed long before anyone had language for what it was doing. Mara noticed first. Captain, hull layer 3 is redistributing stress. Elias nodded. I see it. We're not in any external pressure zone. I know. She turned slowly. That means it's responding to the scans. Elias didn't deny it. Instead, he said quietly, then they're looking too closely. By late cycle, the Union Assembly had reconvened. Tension filled the chamber. Chancellor Seraphine stood at the center platform. We have confirmed inconsistencies in all data received from the human vessel, she announced. Murmurs spread instantly. General Korvac rose. That confirms what I suspected. Seraphine turned slightly. And what is that? Korvac gestured. That we are dealing with something deliberately concealed. Ambassador Nathan Hale stood calmly at his platform. Concealed implies intent to deceive. Korvac snapped back. Then explain the impossibility of what we saw. Nathan didn't raise his voice. You saw people being rescued, and you refused to explain how. We will, Nathan said, when asked respectfully. A ripple of tension moved through the chamber. Korvac stepped forward. Respectfully? You arrive in a vessel that defies physics and expect patience? Nathan met his gaze. We arrived in a vessel that works? That line landed heavier than intended. Silence followed. The turning point came that evening. Korvac acted without approval. A classified directive was issued under emergency security protocol. 3 Union reconnaissance vessels were deployed. Their mission was simple. Approach the Patchwork, disable external communications, conduct forced structural analysis. If necessary, secure the vessel. Inside the Patchwork, alarms did not sound immediately. Instead, Mara noticed the shift in external energy signatures. Then she stopped moving. Captain. Elias looked up from the console. I see it. They've moved from scanning to positioning. I know. A pause. Mara spoke quietly. That's not curiosity anymore. No. What do we do? Elias stood slowly. He looked toward the observation window. Outside, 3 Union ships were taking formation around them. Not aggressive yet, but close enough that intent was no longer ambiguous. He answered calmly, we wait. For what? For them to decide what kind of people they are. On the Union ships, Korvac's voice came through encrypted channels. Begin Phase 2. Systems activated. Containment fields charged. Gravitic anchors engaged. The goal was not destruction. It was control. The Patchwork was to be held in place long enough for study. Then everything changed. The moment Union containment fields activated, the Patchwork responded. Not by firing, not by accelerating, but by redefining the space around it. Every sensor aboard the Union vessels flickered at once, then stabilized, then failed. One engineer shouted, "We're losing lock." Another responded, "It's not jamming us, it's rewriting the reference grid." Korvac stepped closer to the display. Explain. The scientist hesitated. I can't. It's like the ship isn't resisting the field. Then what is it doing? A long silence. Finally, it's making the field irrelevant. Inside the Patchwork, Mara stared at the readings. That's not possible. Elias remained calm. It is if you don't think of space as fixed. Mara turned sharply. That's not an answer. It's the only one we've got. The Union ships attempted escalation, stronger fields, tighter containment, overlapping suppression grids. Each attempt failed faster than the last. Not violently, just ineffectively. As if the patchwork existed slightly outside the rules being applied to it. Then, without warning, all 3 Union vessels lost propulsion control. No explosions, no damage, just silence. Engines idle, weapons offline, systems frozen in standby. A perfect, controlled shutdown. Across the channel, Korvac's voice cut through static. What did they do? No answer came. Because the truth was worse than sabotage. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had been destroyed. Everything had simply been stopped. On Horizon Nexus, the assembly erupted into panic. A military operation had failed without a single shot being fired. And the human vessel had not moved at all. Chancellor Seraphine stood slowly. "This ends now," she said. Her voice carried finality. "The human delegation will be summoned." General Korvac, however, was already gone. And for the first time, he was no longer acting through protocol. He was acting alone. Far outside the station, in the quiet between stars, the patchwork drifted calmly. Inside, Captain Elias Ward closed his eyes for a brief moment. Mara spoke softly. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Elias opened his eyes again. "No." "Then what happens next?" He looked out at the dark expanse. The part where everyone finds out what happens when you try to control something you were never meant to understand. And somewhere in the distance, Horizon Nexus began preparing for a confrontation it did not yet realize it had already lost.